Dr. Sarah Chen walked through the busy halls of New Geneva Station, her worn travel bag hanging from her shoulder. After 3 months on the dead planet Kepler 442c, she was ready to go home to Earth. The research trip had been long and tiring, but she had collected samples that might help understand how life started in the galaxy. The biosecurity checkpoint looked the same as always. Bright white walls, humming machines, and bored security guards who had checked thousands of travelers that day. Sarah stepped up to the scanner like she had done many times before. The machine was tall and silver, with blue lights that would read her DNA and confirm her identity. "Please place your hand on the scanner," the AI voice said in its usual calm tone. Sarah pressed her palm against the cool metal surface. She expected the quick beep that meant everything was normal. Instead, the machine made a strange whirring sound. The blue lights turned red, then yellow, then colors she had never seen before. Suddenly, every alarm in the station started screaming. Red warning lights flashed from the ceiling. Security doors slammed shut with loud bangs. The sound of running boots echoed through the halls as guards rushed toward the checkpoint. Sarah pulled her hand back from the scanner, her heart beating fast. "What's happening?" she asked, but nobody answered. The scanner's voice came again, but now it sounded different. Instead of the calm, computer-like tone, it seemed almost afraid. "Genetic pattern detected. Analyzing. There was a long pause. "Subject identification, Dr. Sarah Chen, human, age 34, but..." Another pause. "Warning, DNA contains impossible sequences. Patterns predate known evolution by 4.7 million years." More alarms joined the chaos. Sarah looked around as security guards surrounded her. Their weapons pointed at the ground but ready. Their faces showed confusion and fear. "Step away from the scanner," shouted a tall guard with sergeant stripes on his uniform. Sarah raised her hands and moved back slowly. "I don't understand what's wrong. I'm just trying to get home." The scanner spoke again, and this time its voice was full of something that sounded like wonder. "Question for subject, have you challenged death itself?" Everyone in the area stopped moving. The question hung in the air like a heavy weight. Sarah stared at the machine, her mouth open in shock. "What did you say?" she whispered. "Have you challenged death itself?" The scanner repeated. "Protocol 7 Alpha activated. Ancient markers detected in genetic structure. This question must be answered." I don't know what you mean," Sarah said. But even as she spoke, strange images flashed in her mind. Dark caves, glowing crystals, and something that felt very old and very angry. Commander Vex of the Altarian Defense Corps pushed through the crowd of guards. His blue skin and 4 arms marked him as one of the non-human species that helped keep peace in the galaxy. His black eyes studied Sarah carefully. "Dr. Chen," he said in a voice that was polite but firm, "I need you to come with me. We have some questions about your recent travel." "But I haven't done anything wrong," Sarah protested. "I was just doing research, studying dead rocks and old minerals. Nothing dangerous." "The scanner says otherwise," Commander Vex replied. He gestured to 2 guards. "Please escort Dr. Chen to holding room 7. Make sure she's comfortable, but don't let her leave." As the guards moved closer, Sarah felt panic rising in her chest. "Wait, you can't just arrest me." "I have rights." "You're not under arrest," Vex said. "You're being held for questioning while we figure out what's going on." The scanner has never asked that question before. In fact, we didn't even know it could ask that question. One of the guards, a young human woman with kind eyes, gently touched Sarah's arm. "It'll be okay, Doctor. We just need to understand what happened." Sarah let them lead her away, but her mind was spinning. What did the scanner mean about ancient DNA? And why did the question about challenging death make her feel so strange? Like she was remembering something important that she had forgotten. As they walked through the station's corridors, she noticed other travelers staring at her. Word was already spreading about the woman who had made every alarm in the station go off. Some people looked scared, others curious, and a few seemed almost excited. The holding room was small but clean, with a bed, a chair, and a small window that looked out at the stars. The guard brought her a cup of coffee and some food from the station's cafeteria. "How long will I be here?" Sarah asked. "I don't know," the guard admitted. "Commander Vex is calling some experts from the Galactic Research Council. They want to run some tests." After the guard left, Sarah sat on the bed and tried to remember everything that had happened on Kepler 442c. The planet was supposed to be dead, with no life anywhere on its surface. But there had been those caves, the ones that seemed to go down forever into the planet's core, and the crystals that glowed with their own light. even though there was no power source anywhere nearby. She remembered going deeper into the caves than her safety protocols allowed. Something had been calling to her, pulling her forward even when her rational mind told her to turn back. The crystals had grown larger and stranger the deeper she went, until she found a chamber that felt like a cathedral made of living light. And there had been something else in that chamber. Something that had spoken to her without words. Something that had made her an offer she couldn't refuse. Sarah shook her head, trying to clear the memories. They felt more like dreams than real experiences. But if they were just dreams, why had the scanner reacted the way it did? And why did she feel different now? Like something inside her had changed during those 3 months on the dead planet. Outside her window, ships came and went from the station, carrying people to hundreds of different worlds across the galaxy. Sarah had always loved watching them, thinking about all the places they were going and the discoveries waiting to be made. But now she wondered if her own discoveries had been too dangerous. If she had found something that should have stayed buried in the dark caves of a dead world. The scanner's question echoed in her mind. Have you challenged death itself? As she thought about it, Sarah realized that maybe somewhere in those crystal caves she had done exactly that. And now she would have to live with whatever consequences came from that choice. The stars outside her window seemed to watch her, as if they too were waiting to see what would happen to the human woman who had triggered alarms that were never supposed to sound, and answered questions that were never supposed to be asked. 3 days had passed since the scanner incident, and Sarah was getting tired of the white walls in her holding room. Commander Vex visited her every morning with questions about her research trip, but she could only tell him the same things over and over again. She had gone to Kepler 442c to study rock formations. She had collected samples. She had come back. Nothing else seemed important enough to mention, but the tests they were running on her blood told a different story. Dr. Chen, Commander Vex said, as he entered her room with a tablet full of data. We need to talk about your genetic results. Sarah sat up on her bed. Finally. Can you tell me what's wrong with me? Am I sick? Is it contagious? Vex's forearms moved in what Sarah had learned was the Altarian gesture for confusion. You're not sick, but your DNA has changed in ways that shouldn't be possible. Some of the sequences we found are older than any known life form in the galaxy. That's impossible, Sarah said.
DNA doesn't just change by itself.
And it certainly doesn't become older. We thought so too, Vex replied. He sat down in the chair across from her. But there's something else. The scanner that asked you about challenging death? It turns out that question is part of a very old protocol that was built into the machine's core programming. We found similar protocols in scanners across the galaxy, but they were hidden so deep that no one knew they existed. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of protocol? The kind that activates when it detects genetic markers from beings who have encountered what the old civilizations called eternal forces. Cosmic entities that exist outside normal space and time. Vex touched his tablet and showed Sarah a holographic image. It showed 3 figures from different points in galactic history. One was a reptilian creature with scales that seemed to shift colors. Another looked almost human but with silver eyes that reflected light like mirrors. The third was something made of living crystal, beautiful and strange. These 3 beings are the only ones in recorded history who triggered the same response you did, Vex explained. According to legend, they all faced cosmic entities and survived. The reptilian was called Zeth the Deathwalker. The human-like being was known as Mirror Eyes Lin. The crystal entity called itself Shardmind the Eternal. Sarah studied the images. Something about them made her feel uncomfortable, like looking at pictures of distant relatives she had never met. What happened to them? That's the interesting part, Vex said. They all disappeared eventually, but not before doing things that changed the course of history. Zeth stopped a plague that was killing entire star systems. Lin prevented a war between dimensions. Shardmind taught civilizations how to travel faster than light. So they were heroes? Or something more than heroes, Vex replied. The records suggest they gained abilities that normal beings don't have. They could see things others couldn't see, understand patterns in the universe that remained hidden from everyone else. Sarah rubbed her temples, feeling a headache coming on. But I'm just a scientist. I study rocks and minerals. I'm not special. Maybe not before your trip to Kepler 442c, Vex said gently. But something happened to you there. Something that changed your genetic structure in ways that match these legendary figures. Before Sarah could respond, an alarm started beeping softly. Vex looked at his communicator and frowned. "What now?" Sarah asked. "Dr. Elena Vasquez is here from the Galactic Research Council. She specializes in ancient civilizations and cosmic phenomena. She wants to try something called deep memory regression to help you remember exactly what happened on that planet." An hour later, Sarah found herself lying on a medical table with sensors attached to her head. Dr. Vasquez was a small woman with gray hair and eyes that seemed much older than her face. She worked quietly, adjusting machines and checking readings. "This won't hurt," Dr. Vasquez said. "I'm going to use these sensors to help your brain access memories that might be buried or suppressed. Sometimes when people encounter things beyond normal experience, their minds hide those memories to protect them." "What if I don't want to remember?" Sarah asked. "Then we'll stop immediately," the doctor promised. "But understanding what happened to you might be the key to understanding what's happening to your DNA." Sarah closed her eyes as the machine hummed to life. At first, she felt nothing except the cool metal of the sensors against her skin. Then slowly, images started forming in her mind. She was back in the caves of Kepler 442c, her helmet light cutting through the darkness. The rock walls were covered with patterns that looked almost like writing, but in no language she had ever seen. As she went deeper, the patterns became more complex, more beautiful, and somehow more alive. In the memory, she could feel herself being drawn forward by something she couldn't name. Her rational mind was telling her to turn back, to follow safety protocols, but her feet kept moving deeper into the cave system. Then she reached the chamber. It was huge, bigger than any natural cave should be. The walls were covered with crystals that pulsed with their own light, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly. And in the center of the chamber was something that made her heart stop. At first, it looked like a person lying on a stone table. But as her eyes adjusted, she could see that it wasn't quite human. It was tall and thin, with skin that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Its face was beautiful and terrible at the same time, with features that looked both very old and very young. In the memory, Sarah approached the figure carefully. As she got closer, its eyes opened. They were black, but not empty black. They were the kind of black that contained every color that had ever existed. "Finally," the figure said without moving its lips. The voice came from inside Sarah's head. "Someone brave enough to come this far. Who are you?" Memory Sarah asked. "I am what your people would call death," the figure replied. "But that is only one small part of what I am. I am endings and beginnings, decay and renewal, the space between one heartbeat and the next." "That's impossible," Memory Sarah said. "Death isn't a person. It's just a biological process." The figure smiled, and the expression was both kind and terrifying. "Your people understand so little about the universe. Death is not just an ending. It is a force, a consciousness, an entity that has existed since the first star burned out. And I have been trapped here for longer than your species has existed." Back in the medical bay, real Sarah's body started shaking. Dr. Vasquez checked her readings and frowned. "Her brain activity is off the charts," the doctor said to Commander Vex. "Whatever she's remembering, it's unlike anything I've seen before." In the memory, the entity continued speaking. "I offer you a choice, human scientist. I can share a small part of my essence with you, give you understanding of forces beyond your imagination. In return, you help me escape this prison that has held me for so long. What would happen to me?" Memory Sarah asked. "You would become more than human," the entity replied. "You would understand life and death in ways that no mortal mind has ever grasped. You would see patterns in the universe that remain hidden from others. You would become a bridge between the mortal world and the eternal forces that shape reality." Memory Sarah hesitated. "And if I say no?" "Then you return to your ship, go home, and forget this ever happened. But the opportunity will never come again." Sarah remembered the moment of decision. Standing in that crystal cave, faced with something that claimed to be death itself, she had made a choice that would change everything. She had said yes. In the medical bay, Sarah's eyes snapped open and she sat up so quickly that sensors fell off her head. "I remember," she whispered. "I remember everything." Dr. Vasquez and Commander Vex stared at her, waiting. "I made a deal with death," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "And now it's free." The silence in the medical bay lasted for what felt like hours. Dr. Vasquez stared at her readings while Commander Vex processed what Sarah had just told them. Sarah sat on the edge of the medical table, her head in her hands as the full weight of her memories came flooding back. "You made a deal with death," Commander Vex said slowly.
"And you think this entity is now free?"
"I don't think it," Sarah replied. "I know it. I can feel part of it inside me, like a voice that's always whispering in the back of my mind. It's not evil exactly, but it's vast, older than anything we can imagine." Dr. Vasquez looked up from her tablet. "The genetic changes in your DNA make more sense now. If this entity shared part of its essence with you, that would explain the ancient markers we detected. But Sarah, do you understand what this means? It means I've probably doomed the galaxy," Sarah said bitterly. "I let some cosmic horror escape because I was too curious for my own good." "Maybe not," Vex said thoughtfully. "The legends about the other three beings suggest they use their new abilities to help people, not harm them. What exactly did this entity tell you about itself?" Sarah closed her eyes and tried to remember the exact words. "It said it wasn't just death as we understand it. It called itself an eternal reaper, something that exists to maintain balance in the universe. It claimed it was trapped on that planet by an ancient civilization that feared what it represented. The architects," Dr. Vasquez whispered. Both Sarah and Vex looked at her in surprise. "You know about them?" Vex asked. "They're mentioned in some of the oldest records we've found," Dr. Vasquez explained. "A civilization that existed millions of years ago, before any of the current galactic species evolved. According to the fragments we've translated, they had technology that could manipulate fundamental forces of the universe. They also seemed to be at war with entities they called the Eternal Ones." Sarah felt something stir in her mind, like the entity's essence responding to the name. Images flashed before her eyes. Vast machines built to contain cosmic forces. Desperate battles fought across multiple dimensions, and a group of beings that looked similar to the entity she had met. "There were others," she said suddenly. "The entity I freed wasn't alone. There were others like it, each representing different aspects of cosmic force. Life, time, space, energy. They were all captured and imprisoned on different worlds. And now one of them is free," Beck said grimly. "We need to contact the Galactic Council immediately." But before he could reach for his communicator, alarms started blaring throughout the medical bay. Not the gentle beeps they had heard before, but harsh warning sounds that meant immediate danger. Dr. Vasquez's tablet lit up with emergency messages from across the galaxy. "Oh no," she whispered as she read. "It's already starting." "What's starting?" Sarah asked, though part of her already knew the answer. "Reports are coming in from 17 different star systems," Dr. Vasquez said, her voice shaking. "Long-dormant ancient structures are activating. Some are sending out signals, others are physically moving. And in 3 systems, planets that were considered dead for millions of years are showing signs of something." Sarah felt the entity's essence pulse within her mind, and suddenly she understood. They're waking up. The other Eternal Ones. They can sense that one of their kind is free, and it's calling to them. Commander Vex was already speaking rapidly into his communicator, calling for emergency sessions of the Galactic Defense Council. But Sarah could see the fear in his eyes. How do you fight entities that exist on a cosmic scale? "There's something else," Sarah said quietly. "The entity that I freed. It's not just wandering around loose. Part of it is still connected to me. I can sense what it's feeling, what it's thinking." "What is it thinking?" Dr. Vasquez asked. Sarah concentrated, trying to sort through the alien thoughts that weren't quite her own. "It's confused and sad. It's been imprisoned for so long that it doesn't remember what the universe was like before. It's trying to understand how things have changed." "Is it dangerous?" Vex asked bluntly. "I don't think so," Sarah said. "At least not intentionally. But it's like, imagine a being that's used to thinking on a galactic scale suddenly finding itself in a universe full of tiny, fragile life forms it never noticed before. It might accidentally cause damage just by not understanding how delicate everything is." Over the next few hours, more reports came in from across the galaxy. Ancient ruins were glowing with energy that hadn't been seen for millions of years. Deep space monitoring stations were picking up signals from regions that had been empty void for as long as anyone could remember. And on several worlds, people were reporting strange dreams about vast beings calling out to each other across the darkness of space. But perhaps most disturbing were the reports about people like Sarah. In different star systems, individuals were triggering the same scanner protocols that had detected her genetic changes. All of them had recently visited ancient sites or archaeological dig locations. All of them had been exposed to something that changed their DNA in impossible ways. How many? Sarah asked when Dr. Vasquez showed her the list. 43 confirmed cases so far, the doctor replied. But the number is growing every hour. Sarah felt sick. It's spreading. Whatever happened to me, it's happening to others. Not spreading, Vex corrected. Awakening. I think these people were always meant to be connected to the Eternal Ones somehow. Your encounter with the death entity just triggered something that was already there. As if responding to his words, Sarah felt a new sensation in her mind. It was like suddenly being able to hear a conversation that had been going on in the next room. She became aware of other minds touched by cosmic entities. She could sense their confusion, their fear, and their growing understanding of what they were becoming. I can feel them, she whispered. The other people who have been changed. We're all connected somehow. Connected how? Dr. Vasquez asked, making notes frantically. Like we're all part of a network that spans the entire galaxy. I think the ancient civilization that imprisoned the Eternal Ones also created a safeguard. They selected certain bloodlines, certain genetic patterns to serve as anchors or bridges if the entities ever escaped. Vex's forearms moved in agitation. You're saying this was planned? That someone knew this would happen eventually? I think so, Sarah said. The architects couldn't destroy the Eternal Ones, so they imprisoned them and created a backup plan. They chose people whose descendants could handle contact with cosmic entities without being destroyed by the experience. But why? Dr. Vasquez asked. What's the point of having bridges between humans and cosmic forces? Sarah closed her eyes and reached out with her mind, touching the essence of the death entity that lived within her consciousness. The answer came to her in images and feelings rather than words. Balance, she said. The Eternal Ones aren't evil, but they're so powerful that they can accidentally destroy entire civilizations just by existing in the same space. The bridge people, us, we're meant to help them understand mortal life, to teach them how to exist alongside smaller beings without causing harm. And in return? Vex asked. Sarah opened her eyes, and for a moment they seemed to reflect depths that hadn't been there before. In return, we gain understanding of forces beyond normal comprehension. We become something more than human, but still connected to humanity. We become the mediators between the cosmic and the mortal. Outside the medical bay's windows, New Geneva Station continued its normal operations. Ships came and went, carrying people who had no idea that the fundamental nature of the galaxy was changing around them. But Sarah could sense the awakening entities stirring in the deep places between stars. And she knew that everything was about to change. The question was whether she and the other bridge people would be strong enough to help both sides understand each other before the awakening. Cosmic forces accidentally tore civilization apart, and whether humanity's natural curiosity and stubborn refusal to accept simple answers would be enough to face beings that existed on a scale beyond imagination. As she sat in that medical bay, surrounded by people trying to understand what she had become, Sarah realized that her adventure was just beginning. She had challenged death itself, and now she would have to live with the consequences, not just for herself but for every living being in the galaxy. 2 weeks had passed since Sarah's revelation about the awakening Eternal Ones, and the galaxy was in chaos. Not the kind of chaos that came from wars or natural disasters, but something much stranger. Reality itself seemed to be shifting in ways that made scientists question everything they thought they knew about the universe. Sarah stood in the observation deck of the research ship Aurora, watching as her new abilities continued to develop. She could see things now that ordinary eyes couldn't detect. Energy patterns flowing between stars, ancient structures hidden in what appeared to be empty space, and the slow dance of cosmic forces that shaped the fabric of reality. The Galactic Council wants to see you, Commander Vex said as he approached her. His usual calm demeanor had been replaced by barely controlled stress. They've been arguing for 3 days about what to do with you and the other bridge people. Sarah turned away from the window. How many others are there now? 117 confirmed cases, Vex replied. And more are being discovered every day. Some governments want to study you all, others want to isolate you, and a few are calling for you to be eliminated. As threats to galactic security, Sarah said bitterly. I've seen the news feeds. The media coverage had been intense and often hostile. Religious groups were divided between those who saw the bridge people as prophets and those who considered them abominations. Scientists wanted to study them, while politicians worried about the implications of having cosmic entities loose in the galaxy. But perhaps most concerning were the reports of strange phenomena occurring around the bridge people. Plants grew faster near them, sometimes in impossible ways. Electronic equipment behaved erratically in their presence, and some reported that time seemed to move differently around certain individuals, though no one could prove it scientifically. "There's something else," Vex said reluctantly. "We've been monitoring deep space and we're detecting movement from the regions where the other Eternal Ones are imprisoned. It appears they're breaking free on their own now." Sarah felt the death entity's essence stir within her mind, responding to news of its siblings. Through their connection, she could sense vast consciousnesses awakening after millions of years of sleep, confused and angry about their long imprisonment. "How long do we have?" she asked. "The nearest one should reach civilized space in about 6 months, Vex replied. "It's something the monitoring stations are calling the Life Eternal. It's moving through a region of dead space, and everywhere it passes, stars that burned out eons ago are beginning to shine again." Sarah closed her eyes and reached out with her enhanced senses, trying to touch the consciousness of the approaching entity. What she found made her gasp. The Life Eternal was nothing like the death entity she had encountered. Where death was calm and contemplative, life was wild and passionate, eager to create and grow and change everything it touched. "It's not going to wait," she said. "The Life Eternal isn't patient like death was. It's going to try to remake everything it encounters according to its own vision of what life should be." "Is that bad?" Vex asked. "It depends on your perspective," Sarah replied. "For the Life Eternal, turning a lifeless moon into a jungle paradise is an act of kindness. It doesn't understand that the people living on nearby planets might not want their carefully balanced ecosystems disrupted by an explosion of new life forms." Before Vex could respond, Sarah's communicator chimed with an incoming message. The sender was listed as Bridge Network, and Sarah had been receiving similar messages from the other transformed individuals across the galaxy. The message was short, but urgent. "Emergency gathering required. The awakening is accelerating. We need to unite before they arrive." "What's wrong?" Vex asked, seeing Sarah's expression. "The other bridge people want to meet," Sarah said. "Apparently, we're not the only ones who can sense what's coming." 3 days later, Sarah found herself on a neutral space station in the Vega system, surrounded by more than 50 other individuals who had been changed by contact with ancient entities. They came from dozens of different species: humans, Altarians, the crystalline Zelthans, even a few representatives of species she didn't recognize. But despite their physical differences, they all shared something now. Sarah could see it in their eyes, a depth that spoke of contact with forces beyond normal understanding. And when they spoke, their words carried weight that seemed to resonate on multiple levels of reality. "The situation is accelerating beyond our projections," said Dr. Marcus Webb, a human xenobiologist who had been transformed after discovering ancient ruins on Europa. 3 more Eternal Ones have broken free in the past week. The Temporal Guardian, the Space Weaver, and something the monitoring stations are calling the Energy Infinite. A Zelthan whose crystal body pulsed with inner light spoke next. "My connection to the Earth Eternal shows increasing agitation. It's been imprisoned beneath the surface of a dead world for so long that it no longer remembers the difference between creating mountains and destroying civilizations." Sarah felt overwhelmed by the scope of what they were facing. How are we supposed to help cosmic entities understand mortal life when we barely understand what we've become ourselves? "By remembering what we were before we were changed," said a voice from the back of the gathering. Everyone turned to see who had spoken. It was an elderly Altarian woman whose forearms moved in complex patterns as she talked. "I was chosen by the Time Eternal 50 years ago," she continued. "I've had longer than most of you to understand what it means to be a bridge between the cosmic and the mortal." 50 years? Sarah asked in surprise. "But we thought this just started happening." "The awakening accelerated recently," the old Altarian explained. "But the Eternal Ones have been stirring for decades, testing their bonds, reaching out to find their chosen bridges. Some of us have been carrying this burden for a very long time." She gestured, and holographic images appeared in the center of the room. They showed disasters that had been averted, plagues that had been stopped, and wars that had ended suddenly when key figures made impossible decisions. Every major crisis that the galaxy has faced in the past 50 years had someone like us involved in the solution, she said. We've been unconsciously helping the Eternal Ones understand mortality, while they've been teaching us to see beyond normal limitations. Sarah stared at the images, recognizing some of the events from history classes. You're saying we've been preventing cosmic disasters without even knowing it? Exactly, the Altarian replied. But now the situation is changing. The Eternal Ones are free and moving toward inhabited space. Soon they'll have direct contact with mortal civilizations instead of working through us, and most of them have been imprisoned so long that they've forgotten how fragile life can be. A young human man raised his hand. So what do we do? How do we prepare billions of people for contact with beings that exist on a cosmic scale? We teach them, Sarah said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. We show both sides how to coexist. The Eternal Ones need to understand that mortal life has value precisely because it's temporary and fragile, and mortal beings need to understand that the cosmic forces aren't gods or demons. They're just operating on a different scale. That sounds nice in theory, Dr. Webb said skeptically. But how do you explain the concept of individual worth to a being that thinks in terms of entire galaxies? Sarah closed her eyes and touched the death entity's essence within her mind. Through their connection, she could sense the other Eternal Ones scattered across space, each struggling to understand a universe that had changed beyond recognition during their imprisonment. The same way you explain galactic ecology to a child, she said, one example at a time, with patience and hope that understanding will grow. As the gathering continued, they began to develop a plan. The bridge people would split into groups, each working with governments and scientific organizations to prepare for contact with the approaching Eternal Ones. They would serve as translators and mediators, helping both sides avoid the misunderstandings that could lead to accidental destruction on a massive scale. But Sarah knew it wouldn't be easy. Fear and prejudice ran deep on both sides. Many mortal beings would see the Eternal Ones as threats to be destroyed, while the cosmic entities might view mortal life as too insignificant to worry about. The success of their mission would depend on whether the bridge people could hold on to their humanity while channeling cosmic understanding, and whether both mortals and Eternal Ones could learn to see beyond their own perspectives. As Sarah looked around the room at her fellow transformed individuals, she felt something she hadn't experienced since her encounter in the Crystal Cave: hope. They were facing an impossible challenge, but they weren't facing it alone. And if there was one thing that humans and their galactic neighbors had always been good at, it was finding ways to survive and thrive in situations that seemed hopeless. The awakening cosmic forces were coming, bringing change that would reshape the very nature of existence in the galaxy. But Sarah and the other bridge people would be ready to help both sides navigate the transition, armed with the most powerful tool in the universe: the ability to understand and communicate across impossible differences. 6 months had passed since the bridge people had gathered to prepare for the coming of the Eternal Ones, and now the moment of truth had arrived. Sarah stood on the command deck of the diplomatic vessel Harmony, watching through the viewscreen, as something impossible approached Earth's solar system. The life eternal didn't look like a ship or a creature. It looked like a living galaxy in miniature, a swirling mass of green and gold energy that stretched across millions of kilometers. Wherever it moved, dead asteroids burst into bloom with plant life that shouldn't be able to exist in the vacuum of space. The sight was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. All ships maintain minimum safe distance, Admiral Rodriguez announced over the communication system. Bridge personnel are authorized to attempt contact. Sarah took a deep breath and reached out with her mind, touching the death entity's essence that lived within her consciousness. Through their connection, she could sense the other Eternal Ones that had already arrived in various parts of the galaxy. The Space Weaver was reshaping empty regions into impossible geometries. The Time Guardian was creating temporal loops around dead stars. The Energy Infinite was turning barren moons into sources of power that blazed like small suns. Each one was trying to be helpful in its own way, but their version of help was causing chaos throughout civilized space. Planets were being evacuated as their orbits changed. Space stations were being abandoned as time flowed differently around them. And everywhere, the bridge people were working desperately to translate between cosmic intentions and mortal fears. Sarah, Commander Vex said softly. It's time. Sarah nodded and activated the special communication array they had built for this moment. It was designed to amplify the bridge people's ability to communicate with the Eternal Ones, allowing for conversation across the vast differences in scale and perspective. Life eternal, she said, her voice carrying across space through channels that existed beyond normal physics. I am Sarah Chen, bridge between your kind and mortal beings. Welcome to this region of space. The response came not as words, but as a flood of images and emotions. Sarah saw, felt, experienced the Life Eternal's joy at being free after millions of years of imprisonment. She sensed its excitement at finding a universe full of potential, worlds that could be transformed into gardens of unimaginable beauty and complexity. But she also felt its confusion and growing frustration. The Life Eternal couldn't understand why the small beings on the nearby planets seemed afraid of its gifts. It had turned 3 dead moons into paradises of exotic plant life. But instead of gratitude, it sensed fear and anger from the inhabitants of the surrounding worlds. They don't understand, Sarah said carefully. The small beings, we call ourselves mortals. We need stability to survive. When you change things quickly, it frightens us. Images flashed through the connection showing the Life Eternal's perspective. To a being that thought in geological time scales, the changes it was making were gentle and gradual. But to humans, and other mortal species, having their moons transformed overnight was catastrophic. I see the problem, Sarah continued. Let me show you how mortals experience time and change. She opened her mind completely, sharing her memories of growing up, of learning, of the slow process of building relationships and understanding. She showed the Life Eternal what it felt like to plan for the future in terms of years instead of millennia, to care about individual lives that lasted less than a century. The connection deepened, and suddenly Sarah was experiencing the universe from the Life Eternal's perspective. She saw the vast dance of galaxies, the birth and death of stars, the endless potential for growth and change. It was overwhelming and wonderful, but also lonely. The Eternal Ones had been isolated for so long that they had forgotten what it was like to have companions who could truly understand them. You're lonely, Sarah realized. You've been alone for millions of years, and now you want to share your gifts with others. But you don't know how to do it without accidentally causing harm. The Life Eternal's response was like a cosmic sigh of relief. Finally, someone understood. But then Sarah felt something else through the connection, a presence that made even the Life Eternal seem small in comparison. The death entity within her mind stirred, and through it she sensed something approaching that was far older and more powerful than any of the Eternal Ones they had encountered so far. What is that? She whispered. Images flooded her consciousness. She saw the first moments after the universe began, when fundamental forces were still taking shape. She saw beings of such power that they could create or destroy entire dimensions with a thought. And she saw one of them approaching the solar system, something the ancient records called the Prime Eternal, the first and most powerful of its kind. It's coming, she said, turning to Commander Vex and the other bridge people who had gathered on the ship. Something much more powerful than the others, the one that leads them. Through the view screen they could see space itself beginning to change. Stars shifted position as the fabric of reality bent around something approaching from beyond the edge of the solar system. The Life Eternal, sensing its superior's approach, began to retreat toward the outer planets. How long do we have? Admiral Rodriguez asked. Sarah concentrated, trying to gauge the Prime Eternal's speed and intentions. What she found made her blood run cold. It's not coming to visit, she said. It's coming to judge. It wants to determine whether mortal life is worth preserving, or if this entire region of space should be recycled. The implications hit everyone at once. The Prime Eternal had the power to unmake entire solar systems and rebuild them according to its own vision of perfection. And from its perspective, the chaotic, short-lived civilizations of mortal beings might seem like a waste of cosmic resources. Can we evacuate? Someone asked. There's nowhere to run, Sarah replied. It can sense life across galactic distances, and even if we could escape, it would just find us eventually. Commander Vex's forearms moved in the Altarian gesture for grim determination. Then we face it. We show it what mortal life has accomplished, what we've built, what we mean to each other. Sarah felt the death entity's essence pulse within her mind, offering her something she had never experienced before. A choice that would change everything. "There's another option," she said slowly. "The death entity is offering to make me its full avatar. I would gain power comparable to the other Eternal ones, enough to stand as an equal when the Prime Eternal arrives. But I would have to give up my humanity completely." "What does that mean?" Dr. Vasquez asked. "I would become death incarnate," Sarah explained. "I would understand the universe on a cosmic scale, but I would lose the ability to care about individual lives the way mortals do. I could argue our case to the Prime Eternal as an equal, but I wouldn't truly be human anymore." The command deck fell silent as everyone processed the implications. Sarah would gain the power to potentially save all mortal life in the galaxy, but she would lose the very perspective that made her an effective bridge between the cosmic and the mortal. "There has to be another way," Vex said, but Sarah was already reaching out with her enhanced senses, touching the minds of the other bridge people across the galaxy. She could feel their combined strength, their shared understanding of both mortal and cosmic perspectives. And suddenly, she knew what they had to do. "There is another way," she said. "But it requires all of us working together." She opened a communication channel to every bridge person in the galaxy, sharing her plan through the network that connected them all. Instead of one person becoming a cosmic avatar, they would pool their abilities to create something unprecedented, a collective consciousness that maintained both mortal empathy and cosmic understanding. "It's never been tried before, Doctor." Webb's voice came through the communication array from his position near Alpha Centauri. "We don't know if it will work. But if it does," added the elderly Altarian woman from her station near the galactic core, "we could speak to the Prime, Eternal as representatives of all mortal life, while still understanding what it means to be small and fragile and temporary." Sarah looked around the command deck at the faces of people who had become her friends and colleagues over the past months. "It's our choice," she said. "We can try this new approach, or I can accept the death entity's offer and become something that's no longer human." "That's not really a choice at all," Commander Vex said with something that might have been a smile. "You wouldn't be Sarah Chen anymore if you gave up your humanity, and Sarah Chen is exactly who we need for this conversation." As space around them continued to bend and shift with the approach of the Prime Eternal, Sarah and the other bridge people began the process of linking their consciousness across impossible distances. It was difficult and frightening, requiring them to trust each other completely while maintaining their individual identities. But as the connection strengthened, Sarah felt something wonderful happening. She could sense the experiences and perspectives of dozens of different species, all united by their shared understanding of what it meant to be mortal in a universe of cosmic forces. Together, they were more than the sum of their parts, a new kind of consciousness that had never existed before.